Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into one of philosophy's most explosive books, Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. You really should think of it less as a book and more like an intellectual stick of dynamite. It was designed to completely shatter the foundations of Western thought. So let's go ahead and light the fuse.
So Nietzsche just throws this out there, right at the beginning. Supposing that truth is a woman, what then? And look, he's not just trying to be poetic here, he's making a really deep point. It's like he's saying that for centuries, philosophers, with their heavy, clumsy methods, have treated truth like some static object they could just capture and own. He's basically telling them, you've been going about this all wrong. No wonder she's always gotten away.
And then, just as you're mulling that over, bam, he drops this bombshell. I mean, for centuries, every single philosopher has started with the same basic assumption. Truth is good. Truth is the goal. But Nietzsche just slams on the brakes and asks the one question nobody ever thought to ask. Why? Why do we automatically think truth is better than untruth, certainty better than doubt? This isn't just a question, folks. This is him putting the entire history of philosophy on trial. And that leads us right into his first major target, this unquestioned will to truth that he says is the shaky ground all of philosophy is built on. Think about it. For literally thousands of years, people have chased the truth like it's the ultimate prize. But Nietzsche forces us to stop and ask, okay, but what is the value of that chase? Is a harsh truth that crushes your spirit really better than a life-affirming illusion that helps you thrive? And the craziest part, he points out, is that apparently no philosopher ever really bothered to ask. So Nietzsche really digs into this prejudice, what he calls the belief in antitheses of values. It sounds kind of academic, but the idea is simple. Philosophers have always loved neat, clean opposites, right? Good versus evil, truth versus falsehood. They just took it for granted that something valuable, like truth, could never ever come from its opposite, like an error. But Nietzsche just blows that wide open. He asks, what if our most precious truths are actually tangled up with, or maybe even depend on, what we call lies? And this is where it gets really wild. Here's the radical idea. What if we need untruth just to live? We're not talking about little white lies here. Nietzsche means the big fictions, the idea that the world is orderly and logical, or that yourself is this one stable, unchanging thing. He says these are all just useful simplifications, falsifications of a chaotic reality that we need to survive. And if you try to get rid of these untruths, he says, you're basically rejecting life itself. And that is the first big step toward getting beyond good and evil.
Okay, so if the search for truth isn't what it looks like, then what have philosophers really been doing all this time? Well, Nietzsche's answer is pretty simple. They've been hiding behind masks.
This right here is one of Nietzsche's most famous and, honestly, most cutting insights. He's saying that there's no such thing as a truly objective philosophy. Nope. Instead, every great philosophical system is basically a secret autobiography. It's not a map of reality, it's a confession, revealing all the deepest instincts, fears, and desires of the person who wrote it. And this just nails his point, doesn't it? On the one hand, you have the image the philosopher wants you to see, the calm, rational, objective seeker of truth. But on the other hand, you have Nietzsche's diagnosis, the really more like a lawyer. They already have a conclusion they want to reach, their heart's desire, and all the fancy logic is just them building a case for it after the fact. So what Nietzsche is telling us is this. If you really want to understand a philosopher, forget about the complex arguments for a second. Ask a much simpler question. What morality are they trying to sell me? What kind of life is this whole system built to justify? Because that's where you'll find the real motivation, the instinct that's driving everything. So if every philosophy is really driven by a hidden instinct, then what is it? We know it's not a will to truth. And Nietzsche says it's not even just about self-preservation. So what's the real engine that drives all of life? For Nietzsche, the answer is his most famous concept, the will to power. Now, it is absolutely crucial that we get this right. The will to power is so often misunderstood. It's not about a simple desire to dominate other people. It's much, much deeper than that. For Nietzsche, it's the fundamental drive in every living thing to expand, to grow, to overcome resistance, and to express its strength. You see, a living thing doesn't just want to survive. It wants to discharge its strength. Self-preservation is just a side effect of that much deeper drive. And once you start looking for it, you see this will to power everywhere. It's in the weed that forces its way through a crack in the concrete to get to the sun. It's in the artist who struggles to impose their vision onto a canvas. And yes, It's in the philosopher who builds a whole system of thought to try and remake the world in their image. According to Nietzsche, it's all the same fundamental drive.
So once you start to see the world as this constant chaotic interplay of different wills to power, the whole foundation of our traditional morality just starts to crumble. And we can finally start to move beyond those simple boxes of good and evil.
Nietzsche basically calls for a new psychology, one that has the courage to really look into the darkness. He says that for too long, we've been held back by our own moral prejudices, too afraid to admit a dangerous truth, that the impulses we call evil, things like envy, ambition, the desire for power, they aren't mistakes or corruptions. He argues they are the very engine of life, totally essential for any kind of growth or greatness.
Now we get to one of Nietzsche's most controversial claims. He looks at all of history and makes this provocative observation. Every single time humanity has taken a great leap forward, it has been the work of an aristocratic society. He argues that it was these ruling classes, with their raw strength of will, who didn't find values, they created them. They imposed their own sense of what good was on the world, and in doing so, they created the very idea of greatness itself.
And this is the core of what he calls the noble soul. It doesn't look at its own egoism and feel ashamed. It sees it as a fundamental law of nature, as justice itself. This kind of person creates values from a place of strength and abundance. It's the total opposite of what Nietzsche calls slave morality, which he says is born from weakness, resentment, and a fear of the powerful. So, after this ruthless takedown of the past and the unmasking of morality, Nietzsche turns his eyes to the future. And he asks, okay, so what kind of philosopher do we need now? And here he makes this crucial distinction between two types of thinkers. On one side, you have the philosophical workers. You can think of them as scholars and academics. Their job is to look at the past and organize all the values that have been. But then, on the other side, you have the real philosophers. These aren't just scholars. They are commanders and lawgivers. They don't just analyze values, they create them. They look to the future and declare, thus it shall be. And this is the challenge Nietzsche basically throws down at our feet. You've all heard his famous line, God is dead. By that, he meant that the old foundations for all our values have crumbled. So in this new, uncertain world, he's asking if a new kind of philosopher is even possible, one who doesn't just look for meaning, but actually creates it. And the question he leaves for us is, are we brave enough to answer that call? And this brings us right back to the beginning. For this new philosopher, Nietzsche imagines, knowing isn't about discovering some truth that's already out there. For them, knowing is creating. Their will to truth is finally revealed for what it always was, in all of us, the will to power. Nietzsche's goal wasn't just to destroy the old values, it was to clear the ground for new ones, leaving us with this terrifying and exhilarating responsibility. If we're the ones who create meaning, the only question left is, what will we create?